Hey everyone, what's up friends? The survival genre is one of the most exciting across all games, because it lets you not only have a good time, but also learn something actually useful. That's exactly why today I'm happy to bring you a brand new list of 20 new survival games that came out this year. So if you're ready, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. DREADZONE, a relatively fresh survival game that came out in early access on Steam not that long ago. The story setup, or rather the core idea, looks extremely simple at first glance. Another zombie apocalypse, but with one, let's say, small twist. You play as an infected person who gets thrown into a quarantine zone, where everything around you is in ruins. Abandoned factories, bunkers, and wild nature. The objective is crystal clear: survive. Either until the local Walking Dead eat you alive, or until the virus fully takes control of your body. Or you can try your luck and actually find a vaccine. As for the gameplay formula, it's very standard for survival games. You roam around the abandoned zone, collect metal, food, and water, craft your own gear like an axe or a bow, or even build your own base to hide from mutants and other trash. At the same time, there's hunting, trading with other survivors, if they don't stab you in the back, and also the ability to raid abandoned locations in search of useful resources. And since I already mentioned other players, yes, of course, like in any modern survival game, you can play in co-op with up to 4 people, where everything I just described becomes even more fun with friends. The graphics are generally fine, but the optimization leaves a lot to be desired. It is early access after all, so stutters can happen even on decent hardware. Overall, it's definitely worth trying, but personally, I'd wait until the developers polish it up, fix the bugs, improve optimization, and add a bit more content. Aloft. Survival games that take place not exactly on the ground, but rather on something floating in the air, aren't really unique these days. The previously mentioned Forever Skies proves that, and earlier this year we got a game called Aloft. In short, you're a survivor in a world where the ground is basically gone, and life continues on floating islands. The main feature here is that you can take any island, attach sails and engines to it, and turn it into a flying ship. You calmly fly around, explore other islands, collect resources, and build your dream base right in the clouds. The gameplay mechanics are mostly familiar and standard for the genre. You chop trees, mine ore, cook food for buffs, but all of it is focused more on chill gameplay and creativity. And yes, co-op is available. I don't remember if it's 6 or 8 players, but you can definitely gather a group of friends. Also, almost forgot to mention that most of the islands in the game are infected with some kind of fungal corruption, and you actually need to clean them up in order to loot and craft safely. And yes, the game gives you a lot of creative freedom when it comes to building your flying islands. Want a palace with a farm? Easy. Want a combat ship with cannons? Totally possible. It's basically like Raft, where you built your own raft, except here your raft is an entire island. Survival the Night. I'm pretty sure that around 8 years ago, some of you have already heard about this game, sometime back in 2017, because that's exactly when it entered early access, and this year it finally reached a full release. So yeah, here we have a very classic survival setup. Another zombie apocalypse and an open world to explore, both solo and in co-op with friends. You roam around and loot different locations like houses, farms, and factories, chop wood to build your own shack, hunt, craft weapons and armor as well as tools, look for food or cook meals so you don't just drop dead from hunger, and you can even build your own base and upgrade your vehicle. But as a rule, all of that needs to be done during the daytime. The game, once again, is split into 2 phases. At night, which makes sense, you'll have to defend yourself from zombies and all kinds of mutants, yeah? Basically like in 7 Days to Die, you can play not only with your own team, but also fight against other players. The game has a PvP mode as well for those who are into that. There's also dynamic weather with different seasons, good old hunting, and fishing. Long story short, it's yet another 7 Days to Die clone, and it's best played with a group of friends because solo these kinds of games feel painfully boring. At least that's how it feels for me. Your experience may be different. Outbreak Island. This is a survival game that entered early access sometime near the end of October, if my memory serves me right. Quickly about the premise and the overall idea. The main character, which is you, receives a letter from your so-called father asking you to come to a strange abandoned island and restore a farm there. Sounds simple enough, right? Like, what could go wrong? The catch is that at night, a strange green beam lights up in the sky. On one hand, it serves as a power source for your electricity. On the other hand, it awakens local mutants and zombies, which adds, let's say, certain complications. So, as you can probably guess, the gameplay is split into two familiar phases: day and night. During the day, everything is pretty standard. You explore different locations, loot whatever you can find, collect resources, restore the old farm, and gradually upgrade your pickup truck that you use to get around. You hunt, fish, do some farming. You get the idea. At night, there's really no need to explain much. Your task is to defend yourself from walking meat using various turrets and similar stuff. The game even has some kind of story, mostly just for show, telling about experiments conducted on the island. And here's something surprising, unlike many survival games where co-op is the bare minimum, this one has none. You'll have to survive and explore the island strictly solo. And you know what? There's a certain atmosphere to that. The reviews are positive at the moment, and the developers are slowly adding more content, so I definitely recommend keeping an eye on it. Another Try 2. And this is another Try 2, a game that ideally should have become a hit, but something went wrong. It's basically a budget Rust, where once again we have a zombie apocalypse, and you're one of the last survivors trying not to become food for the local walking corpses. In practice, it's a classic open-world survival game, where you collect loot, craft gear, and build a base to defend yourself from zombies and other players. The mechanics are standard: chop trees, mine ore, build a house, and pray that no one steals the stuff you painfully worked for. The game also has co-op, so you can play with friends, build your base together, defend it from zombies, or yeah, as the genre tradition goes, raid someone else's base or wait until someone raids yours. However, despite the promising description, there's a huge downside here. Or rather, a whole bucket of it: early access. Because of that, the reviews are mixed, and the game feels like a big, unfinished demo. You only get a couple of biomes, basic crafting, and zombies that sometimes get stuck in textures. The idea itself wasn't bad. PvP-focused survival with co-op, where you can build anything from a small shack to a fortress. But unfortunately, it all feels very cheap and unfinished. For example, the artificial intelligence of the zombies is dumb, and the interface sometimes glitches so much that you want to turn off the game. Overall, it's worth paying attention to. It costs pennies and it has positive reviews, but it's best to wait for patches. I want to believe that the developers will bring this pretty good idea to fruition. Next up is Winter Burrow, a very cozy survival game with equally pleasant hand-drawn visuals, which reached full release in November. Honestly, I have no idea when it originally launched, but that's not really important. The core idea is simple and even a bit touching. You play as a mouse that left the big city and returned to its childhood burrow, only to find total chaos, destruction, a missing aunt, and the need to restore everything so you can just chill by the fireplace. Right away, it's important to understand that this is a very light survival game. These kinds of games are often called cozy. If you're familiar with the term, then you more or less know what to expect. You explore a winter forest, find useful resources, craft tools and clothing, cook food, upgrade your burrow from a simple hole into a warm little home, and meet other animals like frogs or hedgehogs that give you small, useful quests. So yeah, the main feature here is the balance between survival and comfort, where you still keep an eye on cold, hunger, and fatigue, upgrade your inventory, and learn to navigate the forest. There's even a small comparison to Don't Starve, but logically the game is nowhere near as punishing. There's no co-op here, but honestly it's not really needed. Solo feels even more atmospheric, especially on a cold winter evening. If the simple hand-drawn art style doesn't scare you off, I highly recommend checking it out. Earlier this year, Crashlands 2 also came out. A pretty solid sequel to the original, this time with co-op, humor, and a whole lot of alien insanity. You play as Flux Dabes, a courier who gets seriously stuck on a hostile alien planet. The core mechanics are 2D survival mixed with action and role-playing elements. That means you'll be gathering resources, crafting gear, weapons, and even full bases that can be turned into a proper alien hub. Combat is also present, and it's quite distinctive. You can fight both in melee and with psychedelic weapons that shoot things like exploding bugs. Unlike the first game, this one added co-op for up to 4 players, which works pretty well overall. Of course, there's a progression system too. You level up skills, collect gadgets, and even tame local creatures so they can fight on your side. Yeah, at the same time, there are no serious issues with optimization or bugs, which is something this genre often struggles with. The world itself feels like a full-on sci-fi carnival. Jungles with neon mushrooms, deserts with acidic lakes, and tons of aliens, ranging from friendly to the ones that want to eat you alive. The visuals might scare some people off because of the cartoony style, but personally, I don't see anything critically wrong with it. And this one is basically The Long Dark on maximum settings. Or at least that's how people started calling the new survival game from the creators of PUBG, titled Go Wayback. Honestly, by the way, I have no idea why the game is called Prologue, considering it's positioned on Steam as a paid early access survival game. Although there is also a free demo available, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure someone will clarify that in the comments. So here's the idea. Every new run generates a brand new map with a size of 64 square kilometers. You start in an old cabin, and your goal is to reach a weather tower on the opposite side of the map. There are no markers or mini-maps on the screen, just a compass, a paper map, the sky as a reference, and your own navigation skills. On your way to the tower, you'll literally have to survive. You eat berries and mushrooms, both edible and not so much. Drink water from puddles with diarrhea as a bonus. Dry your clothes by a campfire after rain or strong wind. The navigation system here is very realistic. You choose valleys for shelter or ridgelines for visibility, risking getting completely lost. Just like with the previous game, there's no co-op here. The project is strictly single player, which again is pretty surprising for this genre. Everything sounds great, but early access downsides are present. The biggest issue is bug. There are a lot of them, and the amount of content is pretty limited. So realistically, you'll experience everything the game has to offer in 1 or 2 evenings, but not much more than that. Forever Skies is a survival game. I remember people talking about last year, and this year it finally reached a full release, so let's keep it short and to the point. Forever Skies is basically something like Subnautica, but set in a sci-fi post-apocalyptic world. You're given a city completely covered in toxic smog, and your home is a flying airship. You play as a scientist who returns to Earth after an environmental catastrophe wiped everything out, and your task is to survive while exploring ruins, floating in poisonous clouds. The main feature here is the airship itself, which you upgrade like a spaceship. You build compartments, install turbines, craft weapons and scanners to gather resources and avoid storms. You also need to keep track of hunger, thirst, radiation, and the ship's condition, otherwise you're done. Not too long ago, co-op was added to the game, so now you can play not only solo like at launch, but also with a group of friends if you have any. The physics feel alive as well. Every upgrade affects flight behavior, and if you forget to repair the hull, then yeah, logically, your ship will just fall apart. So, if you want to roam the skies on your own flying bucket and try to save Earth, Forever Skies is definitely worth checking out. Also this year, the game Dune: Awakening was released. As you can probably guess, this is a survival game based on the well-known universe. The launch wasn't very smooth due to technical issues, but at the time this script was written, the game is in a completely fine state. If you've seen the movies, you more or less understand what awaits you here, and if not, I'll briefly explain. The place where you're trying to survive is the merciless world called Arrakis. It's basically a massive desert where you play as some unfortunate soul whose main goal is to survive, find water, which is the most valuable currency here, and not get eaten by local sandworms. In practice, it's a kind of MMO survival game. You build your own base from scrap, extract water from blood. Yeah, that sounds creepy, but it works. And ride around on a local bike so you don't turn into worm food. You also can and should craft special suits so you don't literally cook alive and take contracts from traders or bandits. And yes, I strongly recommend playing this one in co-op if possible, because surviving solo here is really not easy. I also can't help but praise the visuals. It's obvious that Unreal Engine 5 can work wonders in the right hands, and this is exactly one of those cases. The game looks stunning, but it demands matching hardware, so keep that in mind. The next survival game is Winter Survival. I'm willing to bet that some of you haven't even heard about it. It reached full release on November 19th, after spending a long time in early access. Here you play as a guy who couldn't just sit at home and decided to go on a winter hike into the forest. Because of an avalanche, everything goes downhill fast, and the hero ends up completely alone in a very tough situation, where the task is simple: survive. To do that, you need to reach a ranger station, which is much harder than it sounds, because your main enemies here are cold, hunger, and wolves with bears that would love to snack on you. Gameplay-wise, it's classic survival. You loot whatever you can find, craft tools and weapons, cook food when possible, build your own shelter or even a full base if you feel like it, and hunt deer while risking running into much more dangerous predators. By the way, a campfire doesn't just keep you warm in extreme cold. It also attracts animals, which is something you need to keep in mind. There are several modes here, and a story mode similar to The Long Dark with different acts, a regular survival mode where you can last indefinitely, and something like a roguelike with separate runs. Surprisingly, there's no co-op. The game is strictly single player. Everything I described sounds pretty decent, but there's also that spoon of tar and a barrel of honey. In this case, it's a limited amount of content, not the best optimization, and of course bugs, which is why the reviews are mixed. Survival Machine. And now we have another survival game where you build a base and survive not on the ground, but this time on a massive moving machine that drags you through a zombie apocalypse. The idea is very straightforward. It's another co-op focused game where you and your friends fight zombies, build a fortress on wheels, and try not to fall into a pit. Imagine a mix of Mad Max with tower defense elements and crafting. You're on a giant mobile platform rolling through wastelands, and your goal is to turn it into an impenetrable fortress. As usual, you collect resources, craft weapons, turrets, and walls to defend against waves of zombies, and there are plenty of them here. The action takes place in a desert biome full of rusty cars, random structures, abandoned mines, and similar locations. Physics are also present here, just like in the previous game. If you overload one side, the whole thing can tilt like a drunk truck driver. And once again, what kind of machine you build is entirely up to you. You can cover it in guns, turn it into a moving farm, or combine both. The only downside is the limited amount of content. You'll get hooked for maybe 8 to 10 hours, which is basically a couple of evenings with friends. Next up is Cubic Odyssey, a game that can be described as a mix of No Man's Sky and suddenly Minecraft. And yes, this is another game that didn't really get much attention and could have easily slipped under the radar. Story-wise, you play as a space adventurer who, let's say, crashes on a planet made entirely out of cubes. Yeah, literally like in Minecraft. But with one important twist, the planet is infected by some kind of cosmic corruption. So the obvious goal is to survive, build a base, and fight in order to save the world. By the way, you can choose between a couple of classes, like a miner or a warrior. The gameplay itself is pretty primitive. You chop down trees, craft everything from small houses to spaceships, and fight creatures of the Red Darkness. As expected for a modern survival game, co-op is present here, so if you want, you can play with a group of friends. There are also 3 modes available: survival with objectives, creative for the lazy, and adventure for the bravest players. That said, since the game is in early access, you already know what that means. There can be issues with localization and bugs, so keep that in mind if you decide to check it out. Salt 2 Shores of Gold. Next is a survival game that technically came out around 3 years ago, but only received its full release this November. So if you haven't heard about it before, now is a great time to fix that. This survival game stands out from all the previous ones, and probably the next ones too, mainly because of its pirate setting. It's basically Sea of Thieves, but with an actual survival focus. The idea is pretty simple. You wake up on a random island in the middle of an endless procedurally generated ocean. At first, you build your first raft, and then gradually upgrade it into a full pirate ship and head out to explore the world. The world usually consists of hundreds of different islands with ruins, pirate bases, cities, various dungeons, secrets, and loot. You can go on this journey either solo or in co-op with a friend, which fits the pirate theme perfectly. Gameplay-wise, it's a good old mix of 3 core elements: crafting, exploration, and progression. You collect useful resources, create weapons and armor with random stats and talents, hunt and fish, cook different meals using more than 50 recipes, complete various quests from non-player characters, and fight pirates, skeletons, and bosses. And of course, what's a pirate game without upgrading your ship? It's basically your mobile base, so that's also fully part of the experience. Overall, this is a game you can easily sink a lot of time into. Next up is RailGods of Hysterra, a survival game with a rather unusual setting, specifically a Lovecraftian nightmare inspired by Cthulhu. The idea goes like this: you're a survivor in a world where ancient gods have awakened and decided to turn everyone into minced meat. Your base isn't just a shack, but a living train that feeds on flesh and demands sacrifices to grow stronger. The core mechanics focus on survival, crafting, and co-op. You gather resources, build train cars, craft weapons and altars to satisfy your metal god. Yeah, as dumb as that sounds. The train itself can be customized to insanity levels, from turrets to ritual halls. There's also a so-called madness system. Basically, if you sacrifice too much to your train, you'll eventually start seeing creepy hallucinations. And yes, the game shines way more in co-op than solo, so if you've got friends, it's definitely better to play together. Long story short, it's a game where you build a train made of nightmares and pray it doesn't end up eating you instead. Next up is Atomfall, a game that many people have already labeled as a British Fallout with survival elements. And honestly, not without reason. The setting here is England after a nuclear war where everything is soaked in Cold War vibes, mysticism, and very distinct British atmosphere. And visually, it's extremely noticeable. You play as a lone wanderer moving through a quarantine zone in northern England, trying to figure out what the hell actually happened here. Gameplay-wise, it's a pretty standard mix of survival, action, and role-playing elements. You walk around, collect resources, craft gear ranging from ammo to medkits, and upgrade weapons to defend yourself against mutants, robots, and unhinged locals. Stealth is also available if you don't feel like going in guns blazing. On top of that, there are dialogue choices that affect the story itself. Yeah, kind of like in New Vegas, just with a British flavor. The world matches the setting perfectly. Green English hills with rusty tanks, pubs, and old mansions scattered around. And the main feature here is total freedom. You can storm through everything with a rifle or sneak around and gather clues to uncover the truth behind the catastrophe. The story itself isn't linear, and at this point, there are already at least 6 different endings counted. I wouldn't be surprised if there end up being even more. If you enjoy Fallout Stalker, or just love digging into lore and building your own story, Atomfall is definitely a game worth paying attention to. Lost Skies. Since I already touched on survival games where you build your own ship and then explore the world, it makes sense to keep going in that direction because next up we have Lost Skies. At first glance, the idea might seem similar. There's co-op for up to 6 players, you explore floating islands, swing around using a grappling hook, and try not to wreck your ship. But as they say, not everything is smooth up in the skies, so let's break it down. First of all, the game puts you in the role of the captain of your own flying bucket, which you build completely from scratch. Planks, sails, engines, everything is in your hands. The gameplay formula is simple. A mix of survival, crafting, and exploration. You gather resources on islands, craft gear, weapons, and ship upgrades, and then fight robots or local creatures that want to knock you out of the sky. The main feature here is physics. Your ship actually reacts to wind, weight, and damage. So don't be surprised if a poorly built vessel just drops straight into the abyss. The world itself consists of hundreds of floating islands, from jungles with ancient ruins to barren cliffs with gravity anomalies. And the overall vibe is just pure enjoyment, especially when playing with friends. Plus, ship customization is fully flexible. Want to build a cozy flying home? or a combat monster packed with guns? The choice is entirely yours. The Altars. There are plenty of very typical survival games today in the most standard sense of the genre, so before we fully dive into those, let's talk about something at least somewhat unique. And the first game like that is The Altars. At first glance, you might think, what's so special here? Another future setting, another hero crashes on an unknown planet, and the goal is to survive. Games like this are everywhere, and that's true, except for one big but. In this game, the hero learns how to create his own clones, called altars. And the key point is that each altar has a unique personality, which is what makes things interesting. One can be a scientist, another a botanist, a third a cook, a fourth an engineer, and so on. Everyone has their own role. Your task is still familiar for the genre: survive while managing your base. The base itself is a massive wheel that moves from point A to point B, and along the way you customize and upgrade it, creating the necessary modules to progress through the story. So the gameplay loop looks like this. You travel, gather resources, and try to keep your team happy, because if they're unhappy, they can easily start a full-blown rebellion. Overall, if you're looking for something truly distinctive, this is definitely not a game you should skip. And this is RuneScape Dragonwilds, a game that currently has a pretty high online player count on Steam. It's a survival game that took classic RuneScape and dropped it into an open world with co-op and dragons, which surprisingly turned out to be a really solid idea, judging by the Steam reviews. So let's keep it short and to the point. Here you play as an adventurer on a new continent, where you need to survive, craft, and of course, take down dragons and other fantasy creatures. The mechanics are classic RuneScape, but in 3D. You chop trees, mine ore, fish, brew potions, and level up skills, just like in the good old days. Only now all of this happens in an open world, where you can build your dream base and fight bosses in co-op with up to 4 players. The world itself consists of several different biomes: forests, caves, and ancient ruins that need to be explored. But the main feature is the progression system, where literally every action levels up a skill. Want to be a mage? Cast spells? Want to be a blacksmith? Forge swords. Plus, co-op really shines here. With friends, you can raid bosses or just chill while building a castle together. And yes, base building is extremely detailed, from simple wooden shacks to massive stone fortresses. It's not for nothing that people compare this game to Valheim. There's definitely something in common. The Last Caretaker. Another fresh survival game that came out in November, so here's the idea. Another post-apocalyptic world, completely flooded, where the entire landmass is covered by the ocean. You play as the last robotic caretaker who gets awakened to save humanity. During the game, you need to collect human cryo-embryos from abandoned megastructures and grow them in a special facility where you manually control temperature, nutrition, and even memory. After that, you load them into a rocket and launch colonies into space. Agree, that already sounds at least wildly unusual. What's more familiar, though, is the gameplay. It's the usual mix of survival, crafting, and exploration with a boat that serves as your mobile base. Using it, you sail across a massive open ocean, loot rusty ruins, craft modular upgrades ranging from weapons to life support systems, and manage energy and resources. By the way, many of those systems are tied to physics, meaning things like cables have to be carried and connected manually. There's also combat, since the remains of civilization are now occupied by various machines and biomonstrosities. But probably the main feature of the game is the vibe, or the atmosphere of total loneliness. Once again, the game is strictly single-player. There's no co-op, and as practice shows, sometimes it's not needed at all to fully immerse yourself in the experience. And the reviews on Steam are positive, despite the game being in early access.